Welcome to episode 19 of the You Understood podcast, where we talk all things mental health. And I'm delighted to introduce episode 19, Josh Quigley as a guest. I'm delighted. I've been chasing Josh down for a number of months, and it's hard to get into Josh's schedule now. But do you want to just do for those who don't know you, do you want to just do a general introduction?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me and inviting me on to chat. My name's Josh Quigley. I'm a professional athlete and cyclist. It's not something I've been doing my whole life, something that came into my life much later. Came from quite a dark place, to be honest. I started cycling back in about 2016, largely because of problems I had with my mental health at the time. I was just looking for something to be a bit happier, be a bit healthier. I set myself a huge big challenge to try and cycle around the world. That's a journey that wasn't straightforward. I had a lot of attempts at that. A lot of things went wrong. I had a huge crash in America, which almost took my life. But I did manage to finally cycle around the world, and since then done a few world records on the bike, and now competing and racing, and trying to see how far I can go within the sport. So
that's a lot to get through. So can we go right to the beginning?
Yep.
So you come from a place called Livingston, grew up there, born and bred, and you alluded just now to the fact that there were dark times in your life. Did that start at a particular age and finish at a particular age, and kind of how did it manifest itself?
Yeah, so I grew up in a wee village called Deans in Livingston, just a sort of classic working class town in Scotland. And it's interesting because my mental health problems really kind of started, or when I became aware of them, was around about 2015. Went through a really big breakup with my girlfriend. We got together about 15 years old, broke up at 22. It's obviously a huge part of my life, and that just was really, really difficult to deal with. So I was just really depressed at that time. And that's when I would have told you everything started. But I think, looking back, there was stuff in there from a lot earlier as well that I wasn't really aware of at the time. And I remember actually a conversation with my ex-partner, and she said to me actually that, for the last few years of our relationship, every time I was drunk, which was most weekends, I would say to her that I wanted to kill myself. So I think there was always stuff in there from much earlier, but it only really became apparent to me really in 2015 when I went through that huge big life-changing event.
Kind of bubbling under, never surfacing until that life-changing event happened. So, I mean, clearly the Josh Quigley sat in front of me today is a very different Josh Quigley from that guy. There was one, so you talked about that catalyst event, and is that, I guess what I wanted to explore is that the catalyst event that you think was the pivot point for you? Or were there kind of multiple things going on, but that event was the one that kind of coaxed everything out?
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to look at it. I think what happened when I went through the breakup was I had a lot of issues in my own family, things that had gone on in my family. A lot of my family kind of fallen out and things like that. And there was a lot of issues. And being with my girlfriend, her family was really close. So I was really close with all her family. So her mum and dad were kind of like a second mum and dad to me. And so a lot of the problems that were going on in my family, I never really dealt with them. I just kind of avoided them all and just kind of went and lived this new life within my girlfriend's family. So I then broke up with my girlfriend and then went back into my own family. So I was going through a breakup, losing my girlfriend. I also basically lost an entire second family. Lost her mum, her dad, all her family. Then back in my family, dealing with that, and also then having to pick up the pieces of all the shit with my own family. Mm-hmm. So it was just all these things at once. I was also running my own business at the time, which was quite stressful as well. You're trying to find enough money to pay staff every month. So there were just so many things going on at once that just all came to a head.
And the way it manifested itself in you then was you and I've seen you talk about, depression as an example. Is that the best way to describe the kind of outcomes of that catalyst event? Or was depression kind of brought around by, the alcohol use as an example?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of both in there, because it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Because first of all, I'm feeling really depressed because I went through this breakup.
Yeah.
I've got all these other issues that I'm dealing with, all these other life stresses. And then to deal with that event, I'm then drinking, and I'm going to the pub Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and absolutely hammering it. So then you think about how I feel on a Monday and a Tuesday, that makes it worse. And so I think it was this negative downward spiral of all these big life stresses plus all the alcohol, and that was just making things a million times worse.
See, I was the same with alcohol, right? So my weekend started on a Thursday, and actually, because I was in the corporate world, they were drinking kind of in between that with suppliers and employees and everything else. But you're right, Thursday through Sunday, and then your early week is just a write-off, isn't it? And then it's time to start again. But it's this cycle. When I think about, so do you drink any more at all?
No.
And again, do you have to battle hard to kind of stay on that, or now it's again a routine? You're grand, right?
No, it's been an interesting journey, because it was round about kind of 2015. That year was really difficult, and kind of later on in that year, I was like, I need to make some changes.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I had to do was to stop drinking. And that was quite an interesting thing for me, because I never imagined myself doing that. No. Like when I speak earlier about, drinking because I was depressed and drinking because I wasn't feeling good.
Yep.
That's only half of the story. The other half is that when I was younger, I absolutely loved drinking. Like it was like my passion in life. Like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, going to Ibiza, tea in the park, Newcastle.
Yeah.
I loved it. And I really did. And I'll always say that I had some of the best times in my life drinking when I was younger. But 2015, it wasn't just going out with your mates on a Friday and a Saturday. It was going out on a Thursday, even when your mates weren't going out, and you're just going up to the pub to see if MD was there. On a Saturday night, whenever they went home, you're staying out and going back to random houses with people you don't know just because you want to stay up. So it was like, it started to become like that, and I thought, I just need to kind of get out of this place. And so I wanted to stop drinking, but at first it was really tough.
Oh, was it?
Really tough. Okay. Like I tried and failed so many times. The first time I'd done about 4 weeks, started drinking again.
Yeah.
Then managed 2 or 3 months, started drinking again. Done 6 months, started drinking again. Another 6 months, started drinking again. And then there was one time in 2018 where I'd kind of failed again. And I remember, it was quite funny actually. It was one of the times before I quit. I was living in Edinburgh at the time. There was one weekend, we just had the wild weekend, and I woke up in a park in Leith, just sitting against a tree, and I was just kind of like, how the fuck did this happen? And that was just one of those moments where I was like, right, I think I need to stop this now. And I never knew what my life was going to look like moving forward, but I knew the one thing that I could control was to stop drinking. And on the 6th of October 2018, I made the decision, like, I'm going to do this. And what I'd done at that time was, I kind of came across these guys from a company called 1 Year No Beer.
Okay. Oh, I've heard of those guys. I
met them at an event. Rory and Andy, they were really cool guys, and I thought, I'm going to do that with them. So I signed up with them. Super. And I thought, let's just do the year, because I always knew if I could do the year, I could do it forever. Because once you get the first year done, and so that's what I done. And once I got that first year, I never looked back. And I can honestly say now that, like, in my day-to-day life, there's zero willpower or effort required. I'm so far away from it now. I'm just a guy that doesn't drink.
But there's a lesson there, isn't there? There's a real lesson in if you went back to that kind of old Josh Quigley, where I feel empathy and understanding there, because it was my life, and like you, I had some of the best cracks ever when I was on it, right? But you start to realise that you're constantly chasing a high that's ever kind of depreciating, if that makes sense. But see if you'd have said to me, and I'm sure this is the question to you, I guess, but see if you'd have said to me at the time, look, you're not going to be drinking for 4 years, right? Which is where I'm at now. I'd have absolutely pissed myself laughing, because there was no way. It was such an integral part. But there's something interesting about that, isn't there? Because people in a situation where it doesn't seem possible, because that is your life, it's hard to grasp that actually it doesn't need to be that way. And I'm not just talking about alcohol, I'm talking about anything at all. If you make a conscious decision and decide to do it because you want to do it, absolutely anything's possible. I don't know whether you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge as well is that like there's all these other outside influences. Like for example, you can have the intention, I want to stop drinking, but then if you look at your environment, for example, growing up in Scotland, where I grew up, it's quite hard to be a young guy at 22 that doesn't drink alcohol, and especially it's a lot more popular now. But even like back in 2015, and if you think about it as well, like when I was younger, I grew up with an amazing group of mates. There's maybe like 10, 15, 20 of us that were all like the best mates ever, every weekend, always going out. And so it's like, you imagine what it's like. It comes to a Thursday, Friday, your phone's like blown up, come to the pub. And it's like, I found it quite hard to like have that conversation and say to my mates, like, I didn't want to do this anymore. And it's like, we were the sort of boys growing up. We're never going to go to Starbucks on a Tuesday and sit and have a coffee and a chat. Like we go to the pub. And so it was like really hard to do that. And I had to just kind of take a step back for the mates that I grew up with, which was really tough at the time, because I just knew that I can't exist in this friendship group, in this environment at this minute in time and be a guy that doesn't drink. What's amazing now is that, 6 years later, I'm living a kind of different life now, so I don't really see my mates as much, but I've still got a handful of mates that are like, will always be my best mates. If I see them now, I could go to the pub, I could be in any environment around them all drinking and sit there and sit with my drinking water because I'm on the bike the next day and be fine. Like it doesn't bother me. So I think you can eventually get to that place, but I think in the beginning, it's like really difficult to do that.
Yeah, and sometimes, and this isn't a negative thing, but I think sometimes people are around other people and it's kind of unhealthy for both parties, if that makes sense. So sometimes kind of coming away from that environment makes you realise why people are there or why people aren't there around you as an ecosystem. There's so much positive stuff that I want to talk about and we'll get there. But first, I kind of want to touch on the low. And you talk openly about a suicide attempt. Was that the culmination of everything, one thing on top of the other? Was that the trough for you? And I guess if you could, because the ironic thing is, on our previous episode, I sat here talking to one of Scotland's great mental health first aid trainers. So I've gone through that myself. I've gone through the assist program, which is suicide intervention, and it really opened my eyes. I've never been to that low point, but I think a lot of people do experience that, and I think for all the statistics, there's a ton more that aren't seen. If you could just give us your view on that experience and how it was at the time, how you reflect back on it now. Just because the reason we do these podcasts, Josh, is really just for the benefit of listeners who may be going through something similar, right? And if there's a branch to cling on to through your experience that they can cling on to, then that's, for us, that's job done, right?
Yeah, I think for me, like that period in 2015 from like January the 1st that year, literally from the go, as soon as all that started happening, like I was really depressed, but I was also really suicidal, and I was thinking about it a lot. And it went on and it went on and it went on. And it got to a point where in May 2015, I'd been depressed for the best part of 6 months, been suicidal for the best part of 6 months. I didn't feel like I was any further forward than I was at Christmas. And I thought, how I feel now is how I'm going to feel forever. That was kind of like the flawed assumption and mistake that I made. And it's quite an easy mistake to make. And one night I woke up, it was a Monday night, I had a really heavy weekend, out every night. And, feeling pretty rough on the Monday. And I just remember waking up at like 1 a.m. I'd been sleeping most of the day because I was just so rough for the weekend. And I remember thinking, like, I'm going to have to, like, be tossing and turning all during the night, trying to get back to sleep and then try and get up at 7 and go to work. And it's like, I can't do this anymore. And I just pushed past my breaking point that night. And I'd had an idea for a while to crash my car. And I basically just went out that night in the car about 1 o'clock in the morning onto the motorway in the M8 and smashed into a concrete barrier at the exit of the slip road at about 70 mile an hour. And yeah, tried to end my life. And it's quite a surreal thing, because as soon as I'd done it, like when I was on that final road, like I knew where I was going to do it. And as I was getting closer and closer and closer, like I knew I had to make a decision, like, do I do this or do I just take the slip road and go home? But like as I was getting closer to it, like I could feel myself getting happier. Where I was like, this is it, like it's going to be over. Like that's how hard my life was at that time. And I remember just literally as about to smash into that barrier, like zero hesitations at all. I remember just feeling like a wee bit of relief that it was going to be over, and then I hit the barrier, and it was like I was just sitting there. And obviously the car came to this huge big stop, 70 mile an hour, and I was literally just sitting in the car, and I was like, what the fuck's happened? I thought I was dead, because it was like I was in no pain.
Yep.
There was all this white smoke,
Yep.
the airbag. There was like a loud ringing noise, and you know, it's like in the movies.
God.
Like I thought, like, am I dead? But like I realised that like I actually wasn't. I was just sitting there in the car, and I was like, I didn't know what had happened, so I didn't know what to do. I just got out of the car and just lay down the side of the road, and I was actually like,
were you physically all right?
I was physically fine. I could not a scratch on my body, and I was just lying down the side of the road, and I had my head like that, and just to make sure, I was just lying like that. I had my head down. Is that Mike okay?
Yeah.
And it was almost just like I was embarrassed, because I was like, I've just tried to kill myself and I can't even put a scratch on my body. And I knew somebody was going to find me soon. I knew there was a car not far behind me. Car stopped and an ambulance came. And I was just lying in the back of the ambulance the whole time with the police and the ambulance crew. And I was just lying there with my eyes shut, like pretending I was unconscious, because I was just so embarrassed and so ashamed. And I remember them trying to speak to me and ask me questions and stuff like that. And yeah, I was just really embarrassed. Like that was the biggest feeling that I felt like at a time in my life where I felt really low and worthless, and I thought, I can't even kill myself. Like I can't even put a scratch on my body. And it was surreal what happened. Like I don't really know how I never even had like a single injury. And like 24 hours after that, like they came along to my bed and said like, you're free to go.
And that was it? No.
That was it.
So I was going to ask you whether it was a conscious thing, and whether you view it as conscious at the time, as in you had your wits about you, you were very clear about what was going to happen. But then the way you described that kind of approach, where I would expect everyone to, like you said, hesitate, flinch, you're actually going, thank goodness. I mean, that I'd never really contemplated that at all. So do you look back on it and it's rationale because that was the world that you were in? So you can explain it. You can explain it rationally. Is that how you look back on it? Or do you look back on it with regret or like almost, what the hell was I doing? Like, how do you look back on it now? Because a lot of time's passed, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, outside of like the work that I do, like I'm obviously like doing interviews like this, and I do talks in schools and stuff like that. But outside of that, I don't really ever think about it.
Do you not?
I don't really think about that part of my life that often.
Yeah.
But I don't regret it in any way, because that was really that moment was like the catalyst for everything that came after it. Like there's been a few kind of like pivotal moments in my life, but that moment, like you can kind of put my life into two parts. Everything that happened before that night and everything that happened after it. And that night, although like I survived physically, something happened to me that night.
Yeah.
Like something happened to me that night in that car.
Yeah.
Because I've never been the same guy since that night. Like something changed within me, like in a big, big way. Like at that time, I was trying to build my business, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was like right into football. I was like honestly football daft, watched every game, huge Rangers fan.
Yeah.
I was like right into politics.
Yeah.
Like I read all the papers. I was like watching all the politics shows, Question Time every week religiously. That's who I was at that time, right? See, after that, like I just stopped watching football. I was interested in football, gave up in politics, kind of lost interest in the business. It was just like everything I thought I was up until that night just like shattered. Just shattered. It was really crazy what happened, and I don't really know how to articulate it. But
do you think there's something around kind of challenge and adversity, like difficult times in somebody's life, where it's perceived as the individual as, really shit, right? It's really tough. Everything's a challenge. But in a lot of cases, all of these things lead up to something actually quite positive, but you can't see that when you're in it, right? And do you think there's something about your journey that was challenging, it was tough, it was difficult, but without it, you wouldn't be, and we'll come on to where you are today, but you wouldn't be sat here without that? Do you think the two are connected, even though there's that real obvious delineation, that line between the two lives of Josh Quigley?
Yeah, I think like that night was just like a huge big like wake up call. I think if you look at like the person that I was up until that moment, I think so much of it was largely influenced by my environment. Like when I was younger, my dad was like in business. My dad worked in the bank.
Okay.
So I think that early drive to want to be an entrepreneur and be like that came from wanting to be like my dad.
Yeah.
My dad was also huge into football.
Yeah.
He was a massive Rangers fan. I think my love of football came from wanting to do something that my dad was into. Like when I was a wee boy, like I wanted to be a footballer. Like when I was really young, I think that came from trying to please him. And I think that night it was like I kind of got rid of all that other stuff that was about pleasing the world and pleasing my family and pleasing the people that I thought I needed to please, and actually just getting to the core of like who I am. I am. And it's it's really, really interesting actually. If you like, see if you go back to when I was really young, like I'm talking like 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, like my earliest memories in life is like riding a bike. Yeah, and I can remember really vividly actually, and I was only maybe about 4 or 5 years old at the time, right, which is quite crazy to remember something so vividly. I can remember being on my bike when I was a wee boy at that age, and I used to like chase rainbows. Like I literally used to chase, cool. I used to chase rainbows and try and get to the bottom of it on my bike. Amazing. I can remember that so vividly. And there's video footage of me like on family holidays riding my bike. See, when I look at that now, obviously knowing what I know now and doing what I do, it's like I just see a wee boy that knew what he was born to do, and I think I got lost along the way.
So let's talk about that, right? So we've gone the low point. Let's talk about that pivot. And again, for the audience, you've got a lot of people out there going through challenging times, tough times, and they're all looking for the pivot. So your pivot was clearly cycling. Did you, after that low point, did you immediately and consciously say, that's the answer, that's the new life for me? Or did you need to do some soul searching to say, you know, who am I? What's my passion? And what's going to be the catalyst for my kind of new life from here? Because a lot of people are in the same situation, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't find that passion, that pivot, because they don't have the time and the inclination, in some points, to spend the focus that's necessary to figure it out. So they're kind of stuck in this perpetual difficult scenario, right? So could you say the earliest memory was you riding a bike? So it was in there, but how did you identify it? How did you bring it back to the fore?
It definitely never came right away. Like, so that night in the hospital, like I was told I was free to go, and before I did, like I went along to the wee chapel in the hospital. As a guy that wasn't religious, wasn't spiritual, wrote a message in the book in the hospital chapel, which basically, I've still got the message. It said, I basically thanked a God I never believed in. It said, I've been given a second chance. I don't know who or what saved me, but somebody's looking down on me, and I'm going to go and do something big with my second chance. I'm going to find out why I'm here. So that was like the intention I set that night.
Got it.
And when I left hospital, like I never done anything about it for months. I didn't know what to do. So I just basically went back to the pub, kept drinking, kept living that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there was a shift, because I can remember, you know, the few months after that, over the summer of 2015, sometimes going up to the pub on my own, sitting there in my favourite pub, drinking my favourite pint of Stella. But I remember just something was different, because I used to love that. Like that was my escape. I used to love going up to that pub, and I would be so happy in there. Have you seen me in the pub in that time? Even when I was depressed, you'd go, that's the happiest guy in the world, because I was in that moment when I was drinking. But see, after the crash, it's like I was sitting there and I was just looking about, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing here? This isn't where I'm supposed to be. And I just remember thinking, like, there must be more to life than this. And so I knew something was coming, but I didn't know what. The real kind of change, the turning point came actually with a conversation I had with my business mentor, a guy that was invested in my business. And I said to him during a conversation one day, if only me and my girlfriend never split up, I would be happy and the business would be doing so much better. And he said to me, what other excuses have you got? And I swear to God, that was it. Like that was the moment where it changed for me. And at that time, he then gave me a book by Jack Canfield called Success Principles. And the first chapter of that book is called You're 100% in control of your life. And Jack spoke about a formula in the first chapter, which was E plus R equals O, which stands for the event in your life plus your reaction determines your outcome. So yes, I had the negative event, the breakup, but like, let's be honest, who's not been through a breakup, a bereavement, divorce? Like, we've all been through a big event, some people worse than others. But my response to that was just drinking, eating crap, no training, not doing anything for my body. So my outcome was where I was. So I knew that if I wanted to change how I felt, I was going to have to change my response and change my actions. And so that was actually like a really exciting moment. I felt like liberated.
That's really pertinent.
I felt like I'm in control of my life here. And I basically done what I called at the time a life audit, where I thought, I'm taking personal responsibility for my life. What can I possibly do to change my life? What can I possibly do to feel better? So I looked at every area of my life. So first of all, the big one, alcohol. I'm drinking 3 or 4 nights a week. I'm going to stop that because that's probably going to help me. What about my diet? My diet's terrible. I eat so much chocolate, crap, junk food, takeaways, Indians, McDonald's. Like I could eat for Scotland. My diet's terrible. So I thought I'm going to start eating better. Exercise body. I'm like 14 stone. Like I'm quite overweight. I'm not in good shape. I don't train. I don't go to the gym. I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start going at runs. Started changing things. Like I just looked at my environment, where I was living, started reading books. I just started doing stuff. Anything that I could possibly change, I changed, and I made more positive. And that was when things started to get really exciting for me. And then I knew also that I was kind of a bit disillusioned with the business that I was running. And I thought, this isn't what I want to do. I want to do something different. And I didn't know what that thing was going to be, but I knew it wasn't the business that I was running. I was looking to kind of get out, and I was kind of in a place as well where the business was failing. Like the 6 months where I was just kind of off the rails, we were losing most of our clients. I kind of got rid of the staff. It was kind of just me left. I was looking for a way out anyway. And I remember one night I was out running on a Saturday night. That tells you what you need to know about that time in my life.
Absolutely, it does.
And I remember exactly where I was when I had this thought. I was like, what if I took on some big challenge to raise awareness of mental health? And that was the idea that I had. And I came up with this idea called the Tartan Explorer. I was going to go around the world in this stupid Scottish morph suit, taking on all these crazy challenges, stunts, challenges, and documenting it all and try to like raise money for mental health charities. And that's what I was going to do. And through my research, I learned that Sir Chris Hoy was the ambassador for SAMH, Scotland's biggest mental health charity. And I found that he was speaking at an event in Edinburgh, a business event. And I thought, all right, I'll go along to that. I'll listen to his talk. I'll try and grab a word with him after it. And I'll get him to like endorse me and support what I'm doing. Like very ambitious. But that was the plan. But what I didn't expect was sitting in the audience that day, listening to his talk. I obviously knew who Sir Chris Hoy was, but I never really knew his story because I wasn't like into cycling or anything like that when I was older. But I was just so inspired by his talk, like listening to him talk about becoming the mindset of becoming a champion, how he become Olympic champion, and it was just so inspiring. And that day sitting in the audience, I was like, fuck it,
light switch, right?
I'm going to cycle around the world.
Wow,
that was it, and that was it. Like that was where it started with the bike.
And I've seen because I obviously did a bit of research, but even your physical transformation is significant. Right, you know, you look back at some of those early YouTube videos, and my goodness, you know, what a difference, right? So today, then,
can I just say something quick?
Go on. Yeah, go on.
My first ever cycling challenge, literally my first ever one, like my first day. I went and done a wee warm up. Like I cycled right around the coast of Scotland to warm up for cycling around the world. And on the first day, on a second day, I stopped at a B&B in Girvan. I came down in the morning. And the woman was like, oh, hi, good morning. What do you want for your breakfast? And I was like, well, you got a fry-up? And she was like, oh, you want a fry-up? She went, most of the cyclists don't usually have fry-ups. And I was like, I'm not like most cyclists. So that was like what I was like at the time. Like I wasn't a cyclist. I didn't eat like a cyclist. I didn't look like a cyclist. So yeah, I had a lot of learning.
But it takes time, right? It takes time and experience. So professional athlete now, right? Not many people can say that. And you've done so much, right? So just I'm reeling off what I remember from the research, but you've done Le Jog, right? Land's End to John O'Groats. Why haven't you done the other way around, John O'Groats to Land's End? Because you've done Land's End, John O'Groats twice, right? Or you attempted it, and then there was an accident. But you've done North Coast 500 in record time. I couldn't get my head around the stats on that. So almost 18 hours in the saddle every day for a week, 18 hours.
That was the greatest distance.
Was that the greatest distance in a week? Yeah. Then the North Coast, then the round the world stuff, which you took multiple attempts to do. And I want to really, really dig into the tenacity of you, the determination of you, because other people would have done a 180, right? But you've done so much in relatively such a short period of time, right? So, yeah, talk to us. And the first question I've got to ask you as a professional athlete, what's your resting heart rate?
So I'm so proud of my resting heart. Honestly, it means so much to me. Honestly, I am. The lowest that I've got it down to is about 33.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get it down to 30. I want to get like 28, 29. Like, that's my goal.
I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, I love it. Sometimes I just see when I'm really, really in good shape. Sometimes I like just sitting actually just feeling my pulse. It just like, it's so slow. It just feels nice. Like, I love it. You know what? My favourite thing actually is when I go to the doctors. See, you go like for a doctor's appointment, especially when I was in hospital in America with my big crash, which I'm sure we'll maybe speak about.
Yeah.
See, when they used to come round every morning and take your obs, and you used to I could see their face, like the nurse was like looking at it, and then she'd look at the machine, and she'd be like, and you could tell she thought something wrong, and I was like, no, I'm just quite fit. Like, it's just, I'm in good shape.
If you're doing that day in, day out, I mean, that's the inevitable consequence, isn't it? So, yeah, talk to us about all these challenges. Talk to us about how you set them. How do you decide to do it, right? And they're also epic, right? One of the things I was thinking when I was looking at them all is, where the hell do you go next? Like, how do you keep, pushing your boundaries, challenging yourself when you've already achieved so much?
Yeah, well, I all started with that idea to try and cycle around the world, and that was how I got started. I set off in 2016, basically tried to cycle around the world, and on the first attempt, I never knew that there would be more attempts at the time. I thought I would just do it the first time, but I basically spent a year cycling around Europe, done about 10,000 miles, 14 countries, and after doing that for a year, I was like, I feel brilliant, like I feel amazing, like I was so healthy, so happy. I just had this amazing adventure around Europe, sleeping in a tent, being hosted by families, reading books and all that, staying in hostels, meeting loads of cool people. It was just an amazing adventure. And after doing it for about a year, I hadn't cycled all the way around the world, which had been the goal, but I'd kind of saved my life and got my life back on track. And I thought, you know what? That was kind of the goal all along, really, was just to be happy again. I never wanted to cycle around the world. I think cycling around the world was my way trying to get happy.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that at the time, but I can reflect back on that now. And so I just quit the cycle and I went back home to Scotland. That was what I'd done at first.
Got it.
And actually, it's funny, at the time I thought I wouldn't ride a bike ever again.
Because you'd hit the high, right?
I kind of thought like I've got what I needed from that. I thought I'm going to go. I had plans to go back to Scotland. I wanted to start a charity and do my public speaking. And I thought I had the story there. I was going to write a book, and that was the story. I went through all that stuff, tried to cycle around the world, never done it, but got my life back on track, and now I'm kind of telling that story. That's what I thought the story was. But then coming back to Scotland was quite hard as well, because when you're away cycling, it's easy to be on the bike and eat good and live clean. But then you're back in Scotland.
It's environment again, isn't it?
The bike's just in the shed, gathering cobwebs. You're seeing your mates, you're back up the pub, you're drinking again. And, very quickly I found, kind of back in that place I started mentally. And so I found that quite tough. And so I got into this pattern of kind of going away and trying to cycle around the world again. And I thought, I'm going to do it, I'm going to finish it. But then I'd go away and I just wasn't quite sure of myself. And I'd come back home. And I'd come back home and I'd start drinking again and be like, no, I need to finish this. So I'd go away. And I was just in a bit of a place where I was just a bit all over the place.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure what to do with myself.
Yeah.
That year on the road, living in the tent, living on £5 a day, bread and bananas for Lidl, just such a simple lifestyle. And it was quite hard coming back to Scotland. So I just really struggled for a couple of years. I was a bit all over the place. And then, and in that was in the time when I started doing other challenges as well. I thought, maybe I should just live in Scotland, but take on challenges. So I lived in Scotland. I didn't have to go away and be on my own, but I could do Land's End to Johnny Groats. I went and cycled around Italy, done some walking challenges, stuff like that. And then I eventually kind of went away for the bike, and I hadn't been on the bike for the best part of 18 months. And then my dad passed away in 2018. And for him days been through that, you know what that's like. Yeah. I found that quite tough. And then started 2019, I was just in a bit of a shitty place again mentally. And like any time where I'd been there in that period of my life, I thought maybe I should get back in the bike. And I decided to myself, right, let's go and see if we can cycle around the world and do it again. And I went away and tried it, and then came back home, and then went away and tried it and came back home, and I was just all over the place. And I got to a point around about April 2019 where I realised that I'd tried to cycle around the world 6 times, and 6 times I'd failed. And on one of my final failed attempts, I cycled from Livingston down to Dover, got the boat from Dover to Calais in France, arrived in France and thought, no, I can't do it. So I got the boat back to Dover.
Wow.
I was planning on just going home, and I thought, no, come on, you've came all this way, you need to do it. So I got the boat back to France, got off in France for the second time and thought, no, I can't do it. So I got the boat back to England again.
Bloody hell.
So that's where I was in my life at that time.
Yeah.
That's how scared I was, that's how mentally unstable I was.
Yeah.
And I just went back up the road again, and I thought, you're going to have to just do this once and for all, or just quit forever.
Because it'll be a scratch. Like you need to scratch the itch, right?
And I'd always been like that as well. There's a bit in the BBC documentary we done last year, Cycling Saved My Life. And my family talk about when I was younger, when I was like a wee boy, I'd go to football, they'd buy me all the football stuff, and I'd go and do that for 3 weeks. And then, oh no, I want to go and do karate, buy me all the karate stuff. I want to do swimming, buy me all the swimming stuff. I was always like, had good energy, good ideas, would throw myself into stuff, but I couldn't finish anything. And I thought, do you know what? It's time for me just to finish something for the sake of finishing it. I'd had 6 failed attempts around the world. I thought, I'm going to cycle around the world. This time I'm going to commit to it. And what that means is I'm not going to stop until it's finished. I'm not coming home until I've cycled around the world. And see, all the moments in my life, there's been quite a few big ones, like the breakup's quite a big one.
Yeah.
The suicide attempt's another big one.
Yeah.
You know, Chris Hoy's a big one.
Yeah.
Getting on the bike the first time's a big one. See that moment in 2019 where I made that commitment to cycling around the world, that was by far the greatest thing I've ever done.
Because you were committing to finishing something then, right?
That was what changed my life. Cycling around the world and committing to that was the thing that took me from being that guy who was just a bit all over the place, couldn't finish things, to being the guy that was just so mentally strong, that can break world records, that can just commit to something and see it through. That was honestly the thing that changed my life.
Where do you think that came from? You know, the move from kind of hesitancy and not being confident to saying, I'm throwing all that in the bin now, and whatever happens, I'm going to finish this. Was that you beating yourself up?
I knew it was my last chance. Like, in the life that I live, you know, you're dependent on people to support you, and people to sponsor you, and people to come behind your big ideas.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky over the years to have many amazing companies and sponsors that wanted to support my challenges and adventures.
Yeah.
And I'd had so many failed attempts that people were losing patience with me.
Right, okay.
But there was people that still believed in me.
Yeah.
And I basically had a company that wanted to still support me, and I just knew that if I don't do it this time, I'm not going to get the support to do it again. Nobody's going to believe me. I was becoming like the boy who cried wolf, because I kept telling people I'm going to cycle around the world, and coming home 2 weeks later hadn't done it, because I was just so like all over the place mentally. And I just knew, I thought, I need to do it this time. There's no going back.
Sometimes you need a spark, don't you?
Yeah.
Tell us something. Tell us the most exciting thing that happened on the world tour. Like, what was the most unusual or exciting thing that happened to you that you weren't expecting? Maybe, I don't know.
There's two things that come to mind.
Uh-huh.
The first thing was, this is like my best memories of that trip around the world in 2019, was just by having that commitment to that goal. What that meant is I had to do it every day. So there were so many times I wanted to quit, so many times I wanted to go home, so many things that went wrong, obstacles, setbacks. But see, because I had the commitment, it wasn't an option. I had to just keep moving forward every single day. And what that forced me to do was literally just keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. And because I was doing it every day, and I was committing to cycling and showing up every single day, I got really good. I got really good at cycling, and I built this amazing engine. And like, I started off doing 50 miles a day, 70 miles a day. By the time I got down into Europe, I was doing 150 miles. Started going across Asia. I done my first 200-mile day. Get to going across Australia, done a 240-mile day. Get to America, 270-mile day. So like, the journey of me going around the world on the bike that year was like a journey of me finding my passion and talent for cycling that I never had in any of the previous attempts. And just getting good at cycling. It was like so addicting, felt so amazing, and see just going a wee bit further every day and constantly try to push my personal best. Like that was the year where I really found that like who I am. Like, see at my core, like I'm an athlete. Like that's what I'm born to be. And that, it was so amazing. I just fell in love with the bike that year in a way that I hadn't done in any of the previous times.
What an adventure! What an adventure! On the training, then, do you think that a large part of training is doing? So people often separate, I've got to train for this event. But the reality is, if you're doing lots of events, you're training by virtue of that, right? So you were saying yourself, you were getting stronger and stronger as part of the event. Whereas before, when you talked about it, you were doing a warm-up, for going around the world but you see what the difference in mindset. I mean, you were just getting stronger and stronger. The engine was being built as you were doing it, and there's something in that as well, I think.
Yeah, to cycle around the world, you don't actually need to train for it. I wouldn't say, like, because I didn't train for it. Like I went out on the bike twice before I done it, just to test like the bike and stuff like that. And it's like you just, whatever you can do. Like, if you can only do 10 miles in the day one, do 10 miles, and then keep doing that until you can do 20, 30, 40, and you'll eventually get around the world and you'll train yourself as you do it. So it was for me, it was just by doing it every day. And I think the key thing was the consistency, because I had times in my life where I was cycling, maybe do it for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and then you stop. But see, because I was doing it consistently every day without the stops and without the breaks, that was the thing that took me from being a guy that could cycle 50 miles a day to 300 miles a day.
So talk about the world record then. So do you still hold the world record?
No, unfortunately.
Oh, really? It's gone?
No, and I never expected to hold it. That's world records. You don't really keep them for long. But to me, the dream was like just to break a world record.
Absolutely.
Like, think about where I was when I started cycling. Like, to tell me that I was going to break a world record, like that was so cool. Like I never imagined that in a million years. So no, that was really special. And a lot of that came out of COVID, to be honest, because what happened to me was, so I basically cycled almost all the way around the world, done about 15,000 miles in 2019, right across Europe, Asia, Australia, halfway across America, and then once I got to Texas, that was when Texas happened.
Big accident.
I had a massive accident in Texas. Got hit by a car at 70 mile an hour. So don't really know how I survived that, but the injury list from that was crazy. So many broken bones, 3 major surgeries, fractured skull, traumatic brain injury, like a list of injuries as long as my arm.
You looked in really bad shape.
It was really bad crash. But honestly, that was like, I took so much from that. Like I can remember being in hospital the next day, waking up and being like, when can I get back on my bike? Like I was so determined to finish that challenge. I think because I knew I was so close. I think because I knew about the story as well. I was like, imagine if I can come back for this and finish this. This is such a great story. I've always been into stories, and I've been aware of the narrative in my life, and I'm always thinking about like, what's the next chapter in my story in my life. And that was basically what my goal was. I want to recover from this accident, get back on my bike, go back to America and finish cycling around the world. But by the time I was recovering and rehabilitating, that was like March 2020. So that was just as the pandemic happened. Lockdown came at quite a good time for me, because I just used it as an opportunity to get in shape. There wasn't any family events or social outings or going for meals. It was just, I was living like a monk. I was just training, eating well, looking after myself.
So you found that a positive experience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I think lockdown went one of two ways. You either got steaming or really fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got really fit. Yeah. And that was just how I dealt with it. And I had so much momentum coming off America. I was so determined at that time. But by the summer of 2020, I was absolutely flying. I was in the best shape of my life. And I kind of accepted this pandemic's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I thought, I'm going to need to come up with a challenge that I can do within the UK. So that's when I started looking at the record attempts. That was when we first done the North Coast 500. And then the following year, we done the greatest distance cycled in a week, and we got the Guinness World Record for that. So that's another example of like something I've always done in my life, is I've been able to find opportunities from negatives. So like, went through depression and a suicide attempt, turned that into getting into cycling around the world. Go through a pandemic, can't go back to America. So what can we do in Scotland? What can we do in the UK? So that was what that was about.
What's next then for Josh Quigley? What's the next big thing
for me now, competitive racing.
Is
like
it?
That, yeah, that's what I've been competitively racing now for the last couple of years, and it has been, not an understatement to say, it's been extremely hard, extremely tough, because, you know, I'm racing against guys that have been racing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and I only started cycling a few years ago. So like my endurance, my engine is incredible. Like I'm a world-class athlete at endurance, like just riding all day, doing those long distance world record attempts. But the racing that I'm doing now, road racing, it's shorter distance and it's fast. Like
Different
it's
animal,
fast
right?
and it's hard.
Yeah.
So it's taking me a bit of time to get fast. It's taking me a bit of time to get up to speed. It's taking me a bit of time to learn the technical elements like cornering, descending, tactics, being smart within a race. There's so many like other skills. It's not just riding around the world, where it's just basically doing 50 miles, doing 100 miles, doing 100. There's so many other things involved. But I've got a clear vision on where I want to go and what I want to do and where I see myself getting to. And I truly believe that if I can reach my potential, that I can make it to the highest level of professional cycling, and I can get to the highest level. And that's what I'm trying to do. And for now, I think I've had to kind of not downscale my ambitions.
Okay.
I think we're doing this interview in 2020.
Yeah.
And you ask me what's my vision, I'm going to tell you I'm going to win the Tour de France.
Wow.
Now I'm kind of like 2 or 3 years into that and realising it's a lot harder, and I found it, and I'm having to kind of scale it back.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, do you know what? I'm just going to take it one step at a time. So for now, my only goals is to have success locally, domestically within Scotland. Like I want to be one of the best racers in the country.
Yeah.
Nationally, locally,
And then build from there.
build
I guess,
from there,
right?
and keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think if I can keep going, I can believe I can get to that highest level where I was talking about a minute ago.
Yeah.
But for now, like I need to accept that like the only thing I can do right now is try and do what's in front of me, and that is success locally, nationally within Scotland and the UK. And I've not been able to do that yet, and so that's my focus at the minute.
But have you got the time afforded to you to be able to commit? Because it seems like to reach those levels, the commitment required is going to be off the charts for the kind of everyday folk. But do you feel like you've got the time to put into it what you need to put into it to reach those goals? Because time's often the limiting factor, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I'm incredibly lucky and privileged the position that I'm in. You know, I'm a full-time professional athlete now. I've got amazing sponsors and partners that look after me, and so my day-to-day life is the lifestyle of a professional athlete.
Wow.
If you look at the best cyclists in the world, the guys at the highest level that are racing the biggest races in the world, I've got a similar lifestyle to them. I'm not doing the races that they're doing, but in terms of their day-to-day lifestyle, waking up, out on the bike, training, stretching, recovery, nutrition, training camps, going to Spain, all that stuff, I've got the exact same lifestyle. I'm just doing races at a much lower level.
Right.
So I believe that because of that opportunity, that I'm in a great place to try and get there, and that's what I'm trying to do. So yeah, I feel really lucky. I can dedicate 100% of my life to training and cycling. I'm not having to go and work a more traditional job and then train around that. You know, full respect to the guys that are doing that, because that's a lot harder. But I'm in a lucky position where I can just give 100% of my life to this.
Do you have rest days?
Yeah.
Still have rest days?
Yeah, always. Yeah, I've got to have rest days. Rest is just as important as the training days. My typical schedule is always usually a Monday's my rest day. So Monday's like a complete day off. Usually a Tuesday's a hard day. Wednesday's an easy day. Thursday hard day. Friday easy day. Saturday, Sunday hard days. So that's kind of the schedule that we work on.
Pretty full on, I guess, but not for a professional athlete, right? That's what you got to do to maintain those levels.
I love it. It's been a wee bit hard for me transitioning to racing as well, because I'm not actually doing as much training as I used to be doing. Because the training's changed. So when I was training for the world record attempts, that was all about endurance. So when you're trying to ride 2,000 miles in a week, I was going out and training maybe 20 hours a week, 25 hours, 30 hours a week, sometimes like a 40-hour week in the bike, because it was all just about building that endurance.
Wow.
But now, because I've got amazing endurance, but I'm trying to get faster, my training's a lot harder.
Yes.
You can't train hard at like 30 hours a week.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like, for example, now I might only go out on the bike for a 2-hour session.
But it's brutal,
but like
right?
an hour of that, I'm on the limit. I'm going full gas. So it's really hard. So maybe I might only be training like 15 hours a week now on the bike. But the intensity is much higher. But that's what I need to be faster and to be better at racing.
Got it. Two final questions for you. The first one is around that kind of determination and that tenacity. I don't think there's many folk in life that have gone through all of those adverse challenges and those difficulties and been determined enough to keep going at it and break through and succeed. Is there anything you can give us that, can point towards where that comes from in you? Is that just naturally there? Has it always been there? Or do you have to work really hard to gather that determination and that motivation to break through or to succeed in those challenges?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've always, from a very early age, I've always been outrageously driven, ambitious, confident, a lot of self-belief. Like I've always been that sort of guy.
Okay.
Like when I was 10 years old, like I knew like I'm going to be somebody one day.
Yep.
And that's always been the sort of person that I've been.
Yep.
I've always had that drive. On the thing about like mental toughness and resilience, I think that's different because if you look back at my life, 2015, I tried to end my life.
Yep.
So you're probably saying that I'm not as resilient in that moment because I'm going through something and I felt like that's how I had to deal with it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like I might go through something now, the same thing, but like I don't feel like I need to take an action like that. So like I think where I've changed is where I've built more mental toughness and became more resilient. And like you look at, for example, when I tried to cycle around the world in those earlier times, like the guy that was getting that boat between Dover and Cali because he was so scared was the same guy that woke up like a year later in hospital with all those injuries and like, when can I get back on my bike? So I think that resilience and that mental toughness can be trained. Like I think you can definitely get better at that, and I think a lot of that comes from the more things you go through in life, the stronger you become.
So it's experience, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you have to do it to experience it. You can't sit on the sidelines, is my point. Yeah. You're out there doing it, and through that experience, you're saying you built the resilience up.
Like that first time in 2015, go through a huge breakup, and I was feeling really suicidal.
Yeah.
I was thinking I wanted to end my life.
Yeah.
And I tried to. When you look fast forward like the best part of 8 years, I just went for another breakup at Christmas there, which was not as bad, but it was still like a really bad one because we were engaged and we were supposed to get married, and I never really expected it. And I wouldn't say it didn't affect me because it obviously did, but just like I've kind of sailed through it in a lot more positive way to the point where I just feel like the good thing about the first one was that when you've been through it the first time, second time it's like, well, I've been through this before. It becomes a reference point.
Exactly.
I'm big on reference points.
Yep.
And I think about it every day. Like, see if you've been through something once before, you can come through it again.
Yep.
And see if there's somebody else who's been through something you've not been through. If I can see somebody else came through something, that can be a reference point for me as well. And so like I think about it every day, my crash in America, and I think about when I'm out on the bike, because near my home, I need to cycle over the motorway every time going out to training, coming home for training. And it's the same motorway where I tried to end my life.
It's a reminder, right?
And every time I go over it, I literally look left, I look right, and I look at the cars flying up and down at 70 mile an hour, and I always say to myself, like literally out loud to myself on the bike, I say, I survived that. I survived that twice. If I can survive that, I can survive anything. And I just say it to myself every single day, just to remind myself like just how mentally strong I am. And I think we've all got something like that. It might not have been a car crash in Texas, but everybody's been through something that they can just remind themselves of daily, to remind themselves of like where they've came from and what they've been through. And I think the more stuff you come through, the stronger you become. In the same way that, like, how do you get a bigger bicep? By going to the gym, lifting a muscle, and when you break down that muscle, it comes back stronger. And I think that same phenomenon in your body is the same in your mind. So how do you build that muscle in your mind? Every time you go through something and you break yourself down, you come back stronger. So I think the way you lift a weight in the gym is like the traumas in your life, like the breakup, the divorce, the job loss. That's the equivalent of lifting a weight in the gym. And every time you go through one of them, you come back stronger. Because then when another one comes in the future, you've been through so many in the past, it's like, well, it's just another one. I can come through it again.
So you beat me to the last question, which was advice, and that is the best probably piece of advice I've heard in a long, long time. Josh Quigley, thank you so much for coming along. Of course,
There's one more that's been really effective for me. Just in terms of final advice, it's like struggling. This like wee motto, I can't remember where I heard it, but it was basically act the way you want to feel.
Okay.
And it's so powerful. So if you think about, imagine you wake up, right? Imagine you woke up today and you just felt really shit and you felt really depressed. And you're lying in bed and the curtains are shut and you just feel terrible. What I've noticed is that, see if you just get up and pretend that you were actually happy. Like, how would I have acted if I felt good? So if I woke up today and I felt brilliant, I'd probably just get up straight away, open the curtains downstairs, tunes on, making breakfast. So see, even if you don't feel good, act as if you would if you were happy.
Yep.
And you can sometimes, and obviously there's certain, like, you know, if you've got a really serious mental health problem, really severely depressed, you know, there's stuff, wee things like that might not help, right?
Yep.
But see, just for the majority of people,
Yep.
we tips and tricks like that can really help. And because what you do is when you act the way you would when you're happy, you can actually trick your brain into just feeling happy because you're taking those actions. And so for me, like, act the way I want to feel is just such like an effective wee thing for just feeling better every day and every moment.
Superb. Josh, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy guy. You're off to inspire a whole group of individuals down the road, but thank you so much for coming in.